All right, so now I can say good afternoon because it's about 1 minute after noon. I am just very honored to be able to introduce our guest speaker today for our luncheon. I was fortunate enough to hear Mark Shriver speak at the National Community Action Foundation, or National Community Action Partnership Conference last year, and was greatly moved by his message of inspiration. I think most of you know he's written a book about his dad, Sergeant Shriver, who I describe as the architect of community action. And in the program book, there's a full-page bio of Mark, so feel free to read that. I'm not going to read that. Instead, I want to read a portion out of this book. Some of you have heard this if you've been to our customer service training, but you're going to get to hear it again. The beginning of the book talks about individuals who had attended a visitation for Sergeant Shriver after he passed away, and Mark captured some of their comments when they came to the visitation, and that's what I want to talk about. Ms. Wilson and Ms. Williams, both of whom waited in the wait line at Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Georgetown for 45 minutes, told me that they were the waitresses at Reeves Restaurant, Dad's regular lunch spot across from his office. And before that, Ms. Wilson had waited on him at the Hot Shops in Bethesda for 35 years. They wanted to tell me that they had never met a more polite, thoughtful man in their 40 years of work. He was such a good man, they said. And I'll never forget the rumble of the garage truck outside my house on the day of the wake and seeing Calvin, the trash collector, standing in our driveway trying to decide whether to walk up to the front door and knock. I made it easy for him. I was on the lawn, so I went toward him. He had tears in his eyes. He took off his dirty gloves, wiped his palms on his work clothes, and reached out his hand for mine. What a life, Calvin said. I read about your dad in the paper, and man, I had to put the paper down. I had to take a step back. Wow. He helped so many people. What a good man. The book also talks about very distinguished individuals who knew Sergeant Shriver as well. But this is what touched my heart, because these are our people. These are the individuals that we serve in our agencies. And these are the individuals that were so touched by this good man. And Sergeant Shriver never forgot that. And I know the same is true about Mark, and I can't wait for you to hear his words of inspiration.
Thank you, for that very kind introduction. That was, I've been introduced, I've given a couple of talks in my life, and I've never been introduced by somebody reading from the book, so that was great. So thank you. You're the one and only. When I first talked to Lana about this, I said, "Is your name Lana or Lana?" And she said, "Lana as in banana." So that was a fun way to start our relationship. And I want to thank everyone. And Lana, thank you so much for inviting me out here. Save the Children, and I run an organization now affiliated with Save the Children, Save the Children Action Network, and we're working in Iowa and in Des Moines, so I'm happy to be here. I've been here a couple of times before, so it's good to be back in Iowa. I do have to say that I've seen a couple of folks as I've wandered around the hall over the last 24 hours, and everybody's been really nice. There's a real sense of Midwestern hospitality, except for one or two guys I'll tell you about. I ran into some guy in the bathroom, and the guy goes, "Mark Shriver?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I thought Maria Shriver was talking." And the guy goes, "Oh, God." He goes, "You're related to her, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay." He walked out of the bathroom. So not everybody in Iowa is as hospitable as some of the folks I've met. I'll tell you one other funny story, Lana. I was asked actually to talk about this book that I wrote on Dad down in Texas by the Bush family. Barbara Bush has this family literacy program. They raise a lot of money, and then they give it out to organizations all across the country that deal with family literacy issues. And it was a real honor I had lunch with President and Mrs. Bush and a bunch of their family members. And the other authors are all best-selling authors. I mean, John Meacham, who won the Nobel Prize for his biography of Jefferson. A guy named Brad Thor, who's written a number of bestsellers, action novels. Another woman named Mary Neal, who was #1. She died, came back to life, and wrote about that experience. And then there was me. So, one of these is not like the other, right? So there are 3 #1 bestsellers in me. But I'm still feeling pretty good about myself. I'm invited down there to Texas. I'm with the Bush family. So I get in the elevator, and the guy comes in with that cowboy hat on, the cowboy hat, the cowboy boots, and he looks at me and he goes, "Anybody ever tell you you look like a Kennedy?" And I looked at him and I said, "Sometimes." And he goes, "That must make you so mad." I was like, okay, all right. So it's nice to be in Iowa. I like Texas, but it's great to be in Iowa. So thank you again, Lana, for introducing me and for inviting me. I want to just say a couple of words about the book and about the work I think that you all do, that I know you all do day in and day out. I'd like to think that Lana invited me because of my work with Save the Children and now Save the Children Action Network, or my work starting the juvenile delinquency program in Baltimore, where I worked for about 6 years, called the Choice Program, or even my work as a state legislator in Maryland for 8 years. But I know that I was invited out here because, as Lana just talked about the book that I wrote on my dad. And Lana talked about the 2 people, or 2 of the folks, Miss Wilson, who actually works at my son's school now, and my son Tommy sees her every day. I saw her last week. Mr. Dove, Calvin Dove, the guy who picked up the trash. Edwin DeBus, who I also wrote about in the book, who works at the U.S. Air Counter at National Airport, waited in line at that service and said that he took my father through security a number of times when he was battling Alzheimer's, and said, your father was such a good man. It was some of the highlight of my career, taking him through security. And I wanted to figure out what those folks meant when they said he was a good man. Because in Washington, and I'm sure it's true in Des Moines and all across the rest of our country, there are some so-called great men and great women that when they're not on stage or they're not on TV are not necessarily good people. And my father had the ability to treat, presidents of the United States. President Clinton eulogized him, or rock stars like Bono and Stevie Wonder, who sang at his funeral, treated them the same as he treated Mr. Dove or Miss Wilson or Edwin DeBus. He treated them the same way he would treat, the people who are going to clean up after us today and aren't necessarily big shots. And he did it with such joy. And I wanted to figure out what made him good, which was different than being great. He got called great for creating the Peace Corps out of nothing, for creating President Johnson's War on Poverty, community action programs, Head Start, legal services for the poor, Job Corps, VISTA, foster grandparents, community health centers, the AmeriCorps folks. That was all really born out from the idea of VISTA services, which is the domestic Peace Corps. So how did he do all this? How did he remain happily married for 56 years, raise 5 kids, all of them love him, do stuff on the national and international stage, treat people the same, go to Mass every day of his life, and I mean every day of his life, regardless of where he was. He knew the Mass schedule, because it was the first question he'd ask when he checked into a hotel, and boom, he was there the next morning at 7 o'clock or 6, whenever the Mass was. So I went back, and the book is really a collection of reflections and stories. So I went back and read. He wrote letters almost every day when I was in high school and slipped them under the door. College, I would get 1 or 2, sometimes 3 letters every day. And it could be about how the Baltimore Orioles were doing great in baseball. It could be about Elie Wiesel's latest book. It could be about some book on Mother Teresa. It could be about somebody he bumped into on the street. And I went back and read those letters and the speeches that he gave that often, frankly, I never took the time to read. And I distilled down the 3 ideals of his life, and they were his faith in God, and it was a faith that demanded acts of hope and acts of love. And the book is a quest to figure out how those pieces all came together to get more joy into my own life. And his faith, I talked about it a little bit, but he was born in a family in 1950. He would have been 100 years old this year. His grandfather, just to contextualize it for a minute, was a 16-year-old kid who took Jeb Stuart to the Battle of Gettysburg. And the Shrivers fought on both sides of the Civil War, both the North and the South. That young man, 16-year-old, went into the seminary, dropped out, went back into it, dropped out, and became best friends with a guy named Gibbons, James Gibbons, who would go on to be the second cardinal in America, and my father's godfather. So he was born in a very devout Catholic family, and you see that faith tested when his family lost what money they had in the Depression. He had to work himself through high school, through Yale, and through Yale Law School, all on scholarships. He went into the Navy the day after taking his final exam from law school before World War II started. And he talked about how he prayed to God that he would survive during brutal battles in Battle of Guadalcanal, Battle of Santa Cruz, when people were getting killed off to his left and to his right. And then you see that faith in action when he moved to Chicago after the war and worked to segregate the Catholic hospitals and the Catholic schools in Chicago, working very closely with Dr. King. I'll tell you one quick story. So in the 1960 campaign, my father had this long-term relationship with Dr. King. And many of you might know Dr. King was arrested about 3 or 4 weeks before the 1960 election. And the Kennedy campaign, my father's in charge of the Civil Rights Division of the Kennedy campaign. The Kennedy campaign had been told that if Senator Kennedy said anything positive about Khrushchev, Castro, or King, okay, the head of the Soviet Union and Cuba and Martin Luther King, the Southern governors would throw their support to Richard Nixon. So when he got arrested, my dad proposed to the campaign that Senator Kennedy call Coretta Scott King to check in, just express concern. And the campaign said absolutely not. So he waited a couple of days, and in Chicago, he waited in a hotel room, everybody left, his Uncle Jack there, my dad, and a guy named Kenny O'Donnell. Kenny O'Donnell goes to the bathroom. Dad says, hey, would you call Coretta Scott King? Senator Kennedy says, sure, I don't have her number. He pulls the number out of his pocket, dials it. They talk for less than a minute, phone call's over. Kenny O'Donnell comes out of the bathroom, and all hell breaks loose. Civil Rights Unit is closed. Everybody thought the campaign had been lost. And what had happened is a couple of days later, Daddy King, Martin Luther King's father, came out, and he was a Republican. He had endorsed Richard Nixon for president, and he changed that endorsement and endorsed Senator Kennedy and said something, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but he said essentially, if Senator Kennedy has the courage to wipe away Coretta's tears, then I'm going to throw my votes behind Senator Kennedy. And a number of other prominent African-American ministers came out in support of Senator Kennedy over the course of the next couple of days. And if you look at the African-American vote in that election, it went up to such a degree that most people think that that's what got Senator Kennedy elected president. And people have said that that was a great political move by my father, but I think for him, 100 years after the Civil War, having grown up in a family that knew both the North and the South and had experienced the segregation and the racism in our country, that I think he thought and had hope that this man, if he got elected president, might take a step like he had done in the campaign to help try to heal some of the racial wounds in this country. So you see these acts of hope throughout his life. The Peace Corps I mentioned, Head Start, community action programs, giving money to people to run programs, to do the work that you all are doing every day, to run Head Start services, to get kids, poor kids, minority kids, a Head Start so they can do well in elementary school, go to colleges that have been segregated forever. I mean, talk about the audacity of hope, right? It's giving money to poor people to help lift themselves up. Legal services for the poor, it's giving money to lawyers who oftentimes turned around and sued my father. And because they were needed to make systemic change. So it really is these acts of hope that you see. And he didn't care whether you were a Republican or a Democrat. He was proud that Mrs. Reagan was the honorary chair of foster grandparents, that Governor Romney's dad, Governor Romney of Michigan, was the honorary chair of Job Corps, that the Bush family didn't spend so much time working on Head Start, which is another effort to knock down walls of misunderstanding and isolation. He didn't care whether you were a Republican or a Democrat. Whether you were a Jew or a Catholic, Christian, Muslim, as long as you were pursuing what the Catholics call through the Gospels, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless. Jews say it's tikkun olam, to repair the world. And those were acts of hope. And then I'll wrap up. Love, I talked about his relationship with my mom of 56 years. I'll tell you one more quick story. My brother Bobby got arrested for smoking pot in 1970, which I love telling that because it makes him look bad. He got busted. But when Bobby Shriver Jr. got busted in 1970, a couple months after Bobby Kennedy had been killed running for president, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. was busted too, it was the front page of every paper in the country. My dad was thinking of running for governor of Maryland, and my uncle Teddy Kennedy didn't know whether he was going to run for president or anything. So it was a big deal. And Bobby had long hair in 1970. He was 16 years old. It was all cut off that morning. And my father was in LA, and he comes back to where they are up in Massachusetts. And Bobby was told, you got to go down the hallway and talk to your dad. I was like, oh boy. And he said he walked down the hallway, and my father opens the door and says, sit down. And he says, look, you're a good kid. I love you. You made a mistake. Take responsibility. But you're a good kid. Don't listen to what anybody else says. And that was it. Boom. And as Lana mentioned, and I mentioned, I was in the state legislature for 8 years. And I think if I were going to run for governor of Maryland, there'd be a lot more yelling in our house if our 16-year-old daughter got arrested for smoking pot. I think the point of the story is only that, he was a guy that was thinking of being governor, but he realized that his kid at that moment needed more love and support, and that kid was at a crucial moment in his life, and that if he knew that love was there, regardless of what mistakes he made, and every kid makes mistakes, right? We all make mistakes. That kid would do better through the course of his life. So that unconditional love, I think, is a profound message for not only fathers, but for mothers as well. So I'm sure you're all sitting here wondering where your dessert is. There's no dessert, no dessert. Okay. Maybe you're wondering what these stories of faith, hope, and love have to do with us all here in Des Moines. And I think my father would have loved the fact that there are 18 community action programs all across Iowa. He would have loved the energy that he would have felt in this conference. He would have loved looking at the brochure and seeing the training sessions that you're undertaking. I think he would have been amazed at the diverse services that you all are providing, from providing energy assistance to early childhood education, early Head Start and Head Start, to the home visiting services and family self-sufficiency programs that you all are running. And I know the effort you're trying to do day in and day out is to help low-income people become less reliant on crisis intervention and crisis assistance, and become more financially independent and secure, and so that they can pursue whatever their dreams are. And I know that the association does such wonderful work trying to affect systemic change, to try to get more resources into the work that you all do day in and day out, the training and technical assistance that the association provides. The oversight and management, I think you'd be so proud of all of that. But I'm sure you're wondering what that has to do with stories of faith and hope and love. And I guess the answer is, what Lana essentially led off by saying is that the people, Mr. Dove and Ms. Wilson and Edwin, that the very essence of what you do every day and what you try to do better tomorrow than you did today, that is really the story of faith in action. It is hope and love in action, as corny as that sounds. Helping to keep people warm, helping to keep people in their homes, helping to train people day in and day out so that they can get jobs or better jobs, educating our youngest kids, making systemic change. These are all, as I said, corny as it sounds, these are all acts of hope, and they're acts of love. I joked at the beginning about being honored to be here, but I really am. And I'm honored because by asking me, and I've seen some of the past speakers you've had here, I'm not a best-selling author, I'm not a powerful politician, I'm not a wealthy businessman. By asking me, you're really honoring my dad. You're honoring a man who fought a war on poverty and illiteracy and misunderstanding, a battle that you all are fighting today. You're honoring a man who created the Peace Corps, an entity that is not serving as many people today as it should be. You're honoring a man who created community action programs, and you're honoring a man who tried to spread Special Olympics all around the world, but who knew as he was dying that people with developmental differences were locked up and isolated in too many places in this country and around the world. You know, you're honoring a man who ran for national office twice and lost both times, and ultimately lost the battle against Alzheimer's. You know, in so many ways, so many definitions, you're honoring a guy who was not successful. I think you're honoring him by asking me because he was faith-filled and he tried to do good. He tried to heed, as I said, the gospel's call to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, and to shelter the homeless. He tried to repair the world. He understood that the ultimate goal is not money, it's not fame, it's not fortune. It's not the things that we so often associate with greatness, right? No, I think what's really important, what he believed, was keeping the faith, being good, and trying to do good. That's the ultimate goal. So I'm thrilled to be able to applaud and to celebrate the very, very good work that each of you does every day. I'm honored to be in a room filled with people who know how tough that work is, who continue to do that work day in and day out because you have faith in the power of hope and love. It's an honor. It's a blessing to be with you all today. Thanks very much for having me.
So we're going to have some questions. Tiffany's got the microphone, so if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm going to start by saying just a little bit. We do a training about the history of community action, and we have a great clip of your dad being interviewed where the reporter says, "So, you're a Kennedy." And he says, the reporter says, "So you're a Kennedy. What do you think about that?" And he says, "Well, my last name is Shriver." And then he has this cute little giggle. It's priceless. Some of you have seen it in our workshop. So I wondered if you'd take just a minute to tell us a little bit about your mom. Maybe you'll write a book about her.
No, I'm not going to write a book about her. I'm not a writer. I mean, she deserves, and there's actually a biography coming out on her written by a woman who's a professor at Brandeis University. And it's hard writing a book, and I never thought I was going to write a book, but I did. So, what was the question? About my mom. Okay. So, you know, I think that they both had this sense of joy, which is different than happiness. You know, you can be happy and it's fleeting. Joy, I think, really comes from within. And I think I know they both went to Mass every day. They believed in God, and they believed in a God that was inclusive. I think they believed in a God I know they believed in a God that was in every conversation. So whether you're talking to the President of the United States or the person who's going to clean up your plate, that's a moment to interact with God, right? Because God is in everyone and in everybody, or you believe that, or you don't believe God exists, because God doesn't just exist with Democrats, or God doesn't just live in Iowa. God is in everything and in everybody. So I think they had this unbelievable amount of energy and joy because they believed that every interaction was a chance to feel the presence of God and to try to improve the world a little bit. And I think they saw it in people kind of taking the equation and flipping it. Because the people you all work with are not perceived by our society as being rich and powerful, which is what everyone gravitates to. So they take the equation and they flip it. And that is so radical and exciting. And they thought that was so exciting that they were fired up every day. She saw it, I think, in empowering people with developmental differences to teach us about ourselves and to teach us about humanity in a different way. Dad saw it in the Peace Corps, Head Start Legal Services, in the work that you all do every day, as corny as it sounds. You know, that real power is in the human interaction, which is not the way society in general values us. They value by how much money you have, or how big your house is, or how many cars you drive. So I think they both shared that energy, and that's why, you know, she did what she did. I mean, she created, you know, Special Olympics. And, you know, I forget about it because I wasn't, you know, 3 years old when she started it, but people with developmental differences are still isolated in our country. They're much worse. They're treated much worse than in other countries. But people now are able to marry, get jobs, work, go to school, have educational services. And a lot of that is the result of the political leaders seeing people with developmental differences running the 100-yard dash, playing soccer. Special Olympics knocked down the walls of misunderstanding and prejudice. And she was fired up and made it happen. And she was excited about it because I think she was ultimately, you know, pissed that her sister didn't have the same opportunities as her brothers who became president and ran for president. There's really nothing like a woman on a mission. So,
This is your chance. Ask Mark Shriver a question.
She doesn't need a microphone, does she?
No.
Blast away. Yes, ma'am.
Right.
You're gonna wait for the mic?
She is.
Hi.
Hi. When listening to what you were saying today, you talked about your dad being a devout Christian and he read the Gospels, and in there it talks about the poor will be among you always. Knowing that your dad knew these things, he still pursued community action. What do you think he was thinking? Knowing that this is what the Bible says, but he still believed that it was something that he needed to do.
I think, you know, that saying, the poor you'll always have with you, is there, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be trying to address the issues, the root causes of that, and to try to not only work with, but to learn from people that don't have the amount of resources that maybe many of us in this room have. Look, we're all poor in some way, right? I mean, last time I checked, nobody's perfect. So we're all got problems, we're all got, you know, issues, we're all broken in some way. So the question is do you want to do something where we're trying to learn from each other and to help heal some of that brokenness? I mean, so the people you work with, you know, they're not making as much money as you. You got issues that they don't have. So I think that's what, you know, the great spiritual leaders understand, that there's so much that brings us together as compared to a lot of our political leaders who stress so much to separate us, to say, you're black, you're white, you're Republican, you're Democrat, you're gay, you're straight, whatever. They separate us. There's so much more of our humanity that we share, and I think he really believed that. And he believed that you should work to try to repair that, and in the process, it helps yourself. Kind of, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, all right. Anybody else? Everybody in Iowa was so quiet. When I got up here and talked, everybody went quiet. I mean, if you're from the East Coast, people are usually like, sit down, shut up. It's so nice out here. People are polite, they beat their horns.
We're very nice people.
They're very nice people.
I'd ask one question, just what is one takeaway you want everyone to know about Save the Children Action Network?
So Save the Children Action Network is a new organization that we started. Save the Children started about 1.5 years ago. And you know, I spent 15, 20 years going around running programs, and I just felt that it's so hard, and you all know this as well as I do, so hard to get money to run the programs, that what we really needed to try to do was to try to affect systemic change and to hold politicians who say kids are so important, hold them accountable to actually make those investments. Because they say it, and then when they go in the back room and close the doors, kids are never a priority, or rarely a priority. You know, I was up talking yesterday in the state capitol, and one senator said, well, all we get is scraps. I'm just kind of sick of getting the scraps. So we're trying to create this entity that EJ, my friend here and colleague who lives in Iowa, is running it here in Iowa for Save the Children Action Network, that will try to raise some political money, try to get involved in the political process, try to use your voice, or people like your voices, to tell politicians this is important, and we're gonna hold you accountable at the ballot box, and we're gonna raise money, and if you are supportive, we're gonna help you, and if you're not, we're gonna tell people you're not really supporting kids. So it's an audacious goal, it's gonna be hard as hell. We wanna become the NRA for kids. Because the NRA, whether you like it or not, they have political juice, they have political sway. But again, you gotta respect it, whether you're in favor of it or not, but the fact is politicians listen to them, and we have to do that for children's issues too, because if gun rights are important, kids' rights, and kids' services, and the work you do in Head Start, early Head Start, that needs to be fully funded. That's what we're trying to do. So if you're interested, we have
Hi, Mike. What advice do you have for younger generations that you would like to pass on?
What advice do I have? I mean, I think, in the example of my mom and dad, it's and I got an email from somebody today, actually this morning, who said that they were considering helping out Save the Children Action Network, but it seemed like such a long slog. And how were we really ever going to make change? And I wrote back to them, I said, it is a long slog. It's hard. And you all know, I mean, look, you deal with families that don't go, if you help them, they don't go step 1, step 2, step 3. They do step 1, then they go sideways 2 steps. They go back 1 step, and then they move forward 2. So it's hard. The work you're doing every day is hard. And to change the funding priorities in this country is hard. So if you're a young person and you're in here and you're doing that work, you gotta stay at it. If you're in here and you wanna make systemic change, you gotta stay at it. You gotta be relentless. I mean, my mother, I said, was a woman on a mission, because she was, I use the term pissed, right? She was, focused. And she wanted to change the world for people with developmental differences. And she stayed on. I was in the state legislature. She used to call me up and I'd say, hi, Mom, all right, good. Listen, has your bill got money in there for housing for people with developmental differences? And I'd be like, you need to call John Comey and find out, we passed legislation in Massachusetts. You need to put that in the Maryland bill. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And I put it in the bill, and the bill got signed, and it happened. But she was like a bulldog, just, biting on and not letting go. And that's my advice. Be like a bulldog, and, just stay at it. It's kind of funny, but it's not really. I mean, the people that make change. I sent this person, then it'll be quiet. I talked to my uncle when he was a senator about this. You have to compromise, you have to grind. He said, you gotta show up at work every day, work harder than the other guy, and realize that you've got to do it every day, and just keep pushing and pushing. Sometimes I know for you all, as it does for me, it feels like we're pushing a rock up the hill. And it's hardest to get out, and we slip. But if we just keep pushing, we're doing the right work, and that's eventually going to be rewarded. Do we have time for another one?
Take another.
Nobody else asked me about Maria or anything like that? Usually I get questions like, we like your sister a lot. Who are you? I know, I'm just a shepherd.
My question was, you were talking about how being great is emphasized as far as having fame, success, and wealth, and that's what's emphasized in our society. How do we get back to the basic foundation of being good, having faith, and walking in love and hope?
I think the work that you're doing is that effort. I think that's pretty much it. Somebody asked me the other day, what is your father and mother's legacy? And I was like, you. I mean, it's you. I mean, they don't have a building named after it. We were talking at lunch, right, about some guy just gave $400 million to Harvard. And they're naming the School of Applied Sciences after him, a guy named Paulson. $400 million. I'm sure there'll be a big ceremony. The building's going to be up there. His name's going to be up there in perpetuity. And I went to this college, and I don't know who the hell half the people on the names on the walls make no difference. I don't know who Bowman Hall is or, XYZ Library. All I know is, and my father and mother, I believe, ultimately really believed that their legacy, and they never talked about legacy, so that's why I put parentheses around it, is the work that you do every day. I think if you would say to them, would you rather have 300 people doing community action work in Iowa, or would you rather have a building at Yale named after you? I don't think my father would have thought 10 seconds, Iowa. And the work that you're doing, spreading, corny as it sounds, hope and love and faith, is really, that's their legacy. The rest of it, building is, it's nice and important, but it's not the work you're doing. I think the work you're doing is, that's
Because
what
I have 2 hands.
Oh, okay.
And then a third, and then we'll take these 3 questions.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Those of you that are married, or maybe you remember your parents having bedroom chats, that unwind you before they go to sleep and what happened, whatever. My question was, I can't imagine what your parents talked about. But how did they meet?
How did they meet?
Yes.
My father, after the war, was in New York City, and my mother's sister, this is before the war, I'm sorry, before the war, he had met Kathleen Kennedy, and they kind of knew each other. She died after the war, and but they kind of were in that same social circuit in New York City. And then my father got assigned, I got hired by Joe Kennedy to go run the merchandise mart, which is the biggest building in the world, in Chicago. And he's smart with my father. So Joe Kennedy then asked him to do other work for him, and he got me acquainted with my mother. They dated for 8 years, so it was not like love at first sight. It was a long, painful process. And I have no idea what they talked about behind closed doors. You were the first person to ever even bring that up. So, that was kind of weird. I'm joking. There were 5 of us.
They had to do something.
Do I have to keep going with this thing? I'm like Catholic and nervous now. I'm a sweat. A sandwich between the 2 of you. I'm going to the back.
So I'll rescue you here for a minute. Community Action is very thankful for all the work that you do, Mark, and being able to come out and to speak with us and to talk about what your parents did, but also the work that you are doing with politically action, moving forward. I wonder, what is your message to us? Knowing the history, but what do you think that we should focus on for the future and talking with politicians? Like, what are you seeing the challenges?
There's I saw in your brochure here, there's a seminar. They're not superheroes, they're just elected officials. You got to get engaged. And, I was a state rep for 8 years, and, I know we're spread across Iowa here, but if these 10 people were in my district and they came down to the state government capital in Annapolis and talked to me and sent me 10 times 2, 20 emails, and then showed up at a town hall meeting with 5 of them, I'd focus. Because I know when I get elected, it's a couple hundred votes, it's a couple thousand votes, and 10 women with their network are gonna influence more than just the 10 of them. But they're, elected officials are not superheroes, they're, average Joes, they're farmers, they're teachers, they're accountants, they're whatever. And you gotta get, to go back to this dude's question, you gotta get there and talk to them. And you gotta get engaged. So, it's the issue, it's whatever the issue is that you're talking about and focus on it, like my mother did. I mean, she obviously was in a different situation, but she did the same thing with her brother who was president. She did with my uncle Teddy Kennedy, because he would say, whenever Eunice calls, just do what she wants, I don't want to talk to her. It was the same with me, because she was relentless and focused and engaged. It's that old Teddy Roosevelt quote, the honor, I'm going to butcher it, but the honor goes not to the critic who sits on the sideline and complains, but to the guy who gets in the arena and gets bloodied and beaten up. So you got to get bloodied and beaten up and push hard, and and don't take no for an answer. Because every politician, go, I did it, will tell you, yeah, that's a great point, and then if you don't follow up, they're not going to do anything. So you've got to stay on them. You've got to, like my mom, bite them in the fanny and don't let go. It's the power of 10 people. It's just, you've got to be relentless.
And the last question.
Last question.
I take away from today's talk is that you are brought up in a family of service, and I'm curious to know, are you also carrying that on to the younger generations, the public service?
Well, we're trying. I mean, my wife and I take our kids, they're involved. My brother runs Special Olympics, so they're involved in something called Unified Basketball, where kids with developmental differences play basketball games with the same team with kids without developmental differences. My brother started Best Buddies, which is a mentoring program, or it's a friendship program for people with developmental differences, and both of our older 2 kids that are in high school have Best Buddies. They do, bowling, they go walk at the monuments, they hang with their buddies, they do the basketball work. Do we do enough? No, but we're trying. They're involved, in our church. So I think we're trying to do that. I'll tell you one last story. So my daughter, after I wrote this book, right? It's a quick one. So it's part of your answer. So, after it's over, we're eating dinner, and my daughter goes, Dad, she's whatever, 12. This is so great. You wrote a book. I'm going to write a book about you when you get older. Or when I get older. And I said, oh, honey, thank you. What are you going to call it? N-O-K, Dad. She said, so, we're trying. We're doing okay. We're trying. Thank you all very much.
I started with the book, and I'm going to close with the book. So, I'm not sure where you got this, but it was on the back of something. Your dad wrote it when he was 87. Did he die when he was 95? Is that right? Okay. So he had this quotation on the back, and Mark found it and includes it at the end of his book. And I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to read part of it. I believe the world was and is created by God, and I believe the world is good beyond description. I believe that we human beings who seek life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness do so because God has given us these things. They are a gift. I believe that we have a responsibility to God to do whatever we can to do good things for people, and especially the poor. I believe in ideals. I believe in the world, that it can be better if only we focus on achieving our ideals. I believe that any failure to achieve our ideals should only result in rededication to them. And I believe in faith, hope, and love. I believe that they have power. And he closes the book with, enough said, good night, good man. And yes, your dad was a good man, and so are you. Thank you. Just a reminder, Mark will be back at 4:30. He'll be available to autograph books and be a part of our event then. And then this evening we have the showing of the movie that they just released. And he's going to be facilitating the panel discussion following that meeting. So a chance to see him at 4:30 when he's part of our extravaganza, and then back again at 6. And I know we have a couple of other special guests that I want to introduce. Many of you know them. They received our Friend of Community Action Award a few years ago. But we have Stan and Dottie Thurston here, and they've continued to support Embrace Iowa with very generous financial contributions to our important project that we use to help families. So I want to give them a chance to stand up and be recognized. recognize excellence because that's how we view our relationship with them. So we are now going to give our Agent of Change Award through the Public Allies AmeriCorps program. So Laura is going to come up for that.
I'm Laura Aldrich, again, the Director of Public Allies Iowa AmeriCorps. Public Allies is a national movement grounded in the conviction that everyone leads. And leadership is a verb. It's an action that we all can take as employees of community action, even as citizens of communities. Public Allies Iowa AmeriCorps has worked to strengthen communities across the state of Iowa by providing nonprofit management training and experiences to the next generation of leaders. We currently have 18 full-time allies serving our program, and they are nearing the end of their term, graduating here at the end of June and throughout the summer. The Agent of Change Award recognizes an ally who has utilized this leadership opportunity to take steps towards creating lasting social change. This ally has taken outstanding acts of leadership at their placement, in the training space, in their familia, which is their region-based work group, where they complete their community service project. So the Agent of Change recipient for the class of 2014-2015 is Jordan Kaufman. Jordan served during her term of service with Polk County Health Department. She was selected by her peers to receive this award because of her commitment to creating an impact. In the selection process, Jordan's peers said the following about why they chose her to be the Agent of Change recipient. Jordan always puts in 110%, whether it's on the job, at training, or on her TSP team. She takes initiative to get things done. She is a great leader as a public ally, and I have come away better knowing her. She is hardworking and creates relevant discussion. Jordan has not only expressed innovation, growth, and initiative within her organization and familia, but also within herself as an individual. She continuously strives to be understanding, open-minded, and strives to explore and bring new ideas and solutions to society. Jordan has, since the beginning of her term, had an inspiring level of devotion to causing positive change in this community and has worked tirelessly, despite innumerable obstacles, to achieve her objectives at her placement. Finally, one ally summed it all up by saying, "She is a true leader." To learn more about the work that Jordan has done during her term, as well as the work of other allies in the program, ally portfolios are on display out in the hall, where every ally has their portfolio on display. These allies, located throughout the state, have been impacting organizations during their term, building the capacity of some community action agencies as well as other nonprofit and public organizations. So please join me in a round of applause to celebrate a new generation of leaders that is prepared to impact communities across our state, and Jordan as our Agent of Change recipient.
All right, what fun. We have a couple of other groups, several other groups that we want to take a moment to recognize today as part of our luncheon. We had our meet and greet yesterday afternoon where you had the chance to engage in conversation with staff from local agencies who've been a part of a special training or certification, and we want to take a moment to acknowledge them now. A year ago, I led the Elite Leadership Program, where we had 9 community action staff participate in an online training. Each individual watches an hour video at their leisure, and then once a month we have a conference call where we would discuss and debate what was in that video that they had watched. We do a pre and post test so that we're able to measure the growth in their learning about the different topics that are a part of the curriculum. Once we've completed the curriculum, then they are we got to come together and eat pie at our celebration. Imagine that, eating pie with Lana. And they got their elite certification. It's a great program. It's free to any community action agency employee. So if you're interested, we'll be promoting sign up for the next elite class in our next Tell Me What's Happening newsletter. So I would like our elite class to please stand and be recognized. It was fun. The next group of leaders we'd like to recognize are our National Certified Roma Trainers. This is a national certification, and you've heard a lot about Roma through our conference already, and some of you have been to the Roma workshops. This is a very intense certification. One of the organizational standards requires that every local community action agency access the expertise of a certified Roma trainer. So Iowa has really stepped up to the plate in getting more of our staff certified. So if you are right now a certified Roma trainer or a candidate for certification, please stand and be recognized. We have 2 special certified Roma trainers. Tiffany, if you would stand, and David Hagan, where are you? Uh-oh, Jane, he's gone. These 2 individuals are almost completed with their master trainer certification, which is even better because now they'll be able to certify individuals from Iowa. So it'll be great to have 2 master trainers. So kudos to you 2. And last but not least, our certified community action professionals. Now, this particular leadership process takes a little bit longer. You can become a certified community action professional in as little as 1 year and up to 3 years. It does require, oh, did I say something wrong? Okay. It requires a significant amount of reading and research. But you become very wise about community action. There's an intensive training on the history of community action. You do a portfolio of all of your experience, your professional experience in our world of work. And then you also do a special project. And through both of those pieces of mastery, you receive points. And if you get enough points, then you're allowed to take the test. That was a selective use of language, allowed to take the test. And all the testing happens on the same day all across the country, and everyone who's trying to get certified takes the test at the same time. And if you can get enough points on your test, then you become a certified community action professional. So it's a large commitment, it's a huge commitment of time, and it is a wonderful learning experience. So I want to honor all of our certified community action professionals, so if you would please stand. So I'm going to put a plug in for our afternoon activity, our extravaganza. I hope you will be here and participate fully. That's when we'll get to have our dessert. Mark didn't know that. So if you want dessert, come back for the extravaganza. We'll be having our auction. We'll be raising funds for the National Community Action Foundation. We're going to get done a little bit early with the lunch, so you'll have lots of time to go around and look at the baskets and the silent auction items and enjoy your afternoon workshops, and we'll see you back here this afternoon. Thank you.
Right now. 12:55 is the proper time. Okay. I was just looking at the auction stuff. When do you start? So it's like 3:32. Section 1 will close at 4. Silent auction will be at 3:15 for all